The car jolted to a sudden stop. The passenger's heart raced as the driver slammed the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt. The street was empty. No lights, no sounds, just the quiet hum of a darkened city and the pulse of her panic. "You've got to be kidding me," the driver muttered under his breath, his voice harsh, a growl that cut through the stillness of the night. He yanked the wheel sharply, making another turn that threw the woman against the side of the seat. The lights in the car flickered once, twice, before going dark. For a moment, it felt as though time stood still. The woman's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of the air in the car. It was thick, stifling. The only sound she could hear was the rapid thud of her heart and the unsettlingly quiet hum of the engine as it sputtered. Her hands were shaking in her lap, fingers digging into the fraying fabric of her purse. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. She had been in taxis before, countless times, but tonight something felt off. The street was unfamiliar, too quiet. The driver's strange behavior made her uneasy, as if he was holding something back, something important. The driver's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. His expression was unreadable. No smile. No acknowledgement. His lips were pressed into a thin line, a permanent frown etched into his face. He didn't say anything for a moment, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, but there was something in his gaze, something sharp. And then, without warning, he slammed his hand against the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The car jolted again, this time in anger, as he shouted into the empty air. "You think this is funny? You think this is a joke?" The woman's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to react. The tension between them grew thicker, a palpable force pressing against her chest. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything by it," she stammered, her voice faltering as she gripped the armrest. But the driver cut her off, his voice turning cold, almost like ice. "Don't apologize. It's not about what you said. It's about what you didn't do. You think I'm gonna drive you for free, just because you can't get your act together?" The words hit her like a punch in the gut. The implication hung in the air, suffocating her. What was he talking about? She had been a few dollars short when she entered the cab, that was true. But she had planned to explain it to him, to let him know she would find a way to pay once she got to her destination. But now, this? She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. "I'm really sorry. I'll pay you as soon as I can. Please, just take me where I need to go." The car was still idling, but there was something about the stillness of the moment that made it feel even more oppressive. The city outside was far away, the streetlights a faint glow through the foggy windows. It was as if the world had shrunk down to just the two of them. The air inside the cab was thick with unspoken words. The driver didn't answer right away. He just sat there, his grip tight on the steering wheel. His jaw clenched. For a moment, she wondered if he was going to ignore her altogether, or perhaps make her walk the rest of the way home. "Get out," he finally said, his voice low and cold. "Get out of my car." She blinked, stunned. "What?" "I said get out. Now." The woman's hands went cold, her mind scrambling for a response, something to get him to change his mind. "Please, I don't have enough for another ride. I can't just get out here." "Not my problem," he replied sharply, his voice a knife. "You think I'm just some sucker who's going to let you ride without paying? You can't pay me, then you can walk." She could feel the blood rushing to her face. This wasn't what she had expected when she got into the taxi. She wasn't used to confrontation. She was always polite, always calm, and this was a nightmare. "I'll make it up to you. I swear, I can find a way to," she started, but the words seemed hollow even to her. What was she supposed to do? Beg? The driver shot her a glance through the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing. I don't take people like you. You think you're special? You think I'm going to let you off because you look all helpless? No. You're not getting out of this that easily. He slammed the door of the car shut, locking it with a mechanical click that made her flinch. He didn't even give her a chance to speak. The woman sat there, stunned, unable to comprehend the situation. How had this gone so wrong? Her chest tightened further as she looked out the window. The city was unfamiliar, the streets dark and winding. She had no idea where she was. This wasn't her neighborhood. It was as if the world around her had been swallowed up by shadows. Desperation surged through her. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to offend you. I don't have enough. I'll figure it out. I promise." But the driver didn't answer. He just sat there, staring straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him from snapping. His face was cold, unreadable. There was nothing human in his expression now. Just a shadow of something darker, something far less forgiving. The woman looked around frantically, her heart racing in her chest. There was no one on the street. No cars, no pedestrians. Just the dim glow of distant lights and the oppressive silence. Her fingers clenched the edge of the seat as the seconds stretched into eternity. She could feel her pulse in her throat, her mind spinning in circles. "Please, don't do this," she begged, her voice breaking. The driver's lips twisted into a sneer, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, something darker than anger. Something cold and calculating. But then he turned away from her gaze, his hands moving over the gearshift, preparing to drive off. "I'm not your charity case," he muttered, barely audible. "You don't deserve my pity. You're not getting away that easy." The words hung in the air like a warning. A threat. A sudden chill swept through the car, and she felt it, not in the temperature, but in the way the air seemed to freeze between them. It was as if she had just stepped into a trap, and the driver was the one holding the key to her fate. Her mind raced, desperately trying to think of a way out. She couldn't afford another ride. She had no money left, and now she was stuck in the middle of nowhere with a driver who seemed intent on making her life miserable. She looked down at her hands, still clutching the purse, still holding on to the remnants of hope that she could find a way to make this right. But hope was quickly fading, replaced by the harsh reality of the situation. The driver finally spoke again, his voice low and menacing. "You'll regret not having enough money for this ride. Trust me. You'll wish you had paid me back when you had the chance." Her throat tightened. She felt the weight of his words settle heavily on her chest. What did he mean? Was he threatening her? What was going to happen next? She had no idea. But whatever it was, she knew one thing: she had just crossed a line. And the night was far from over. The driver's eyes were locked on the road ahead, but the woman couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her from the corner of his vision, waiting for her next move. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, a frantic rhythm that didn't seem to match the eerie stillness of the car. She sat in the back seat, her body stiff, trying not to make any sudden movements. Every breath felt like a mistake. The city lights outside were blurred streaks, fading as they drove deeper into the heart of unfamiliar streets. The neon glow from bars and corner stores disappeared, replaced by the oppressive darkness of side roads and alleyways. Her gut told her this was a bad idea, getting in this cab in the first place, trusting this man. Her instincts screamed at her to act, to do something, but what? She had no idea where they were, no way to call for help. She had only been trying to get to a friend's house. A quick ride, a short trip. It wasn't supposed to turn into this. Her mind raced, searching for a way to regain control of the situation, but each passing second felt like it slipped further away. The driver remained silent, his hands clenched tightly on the steering wheel. The hum of the engine was the only sound filling the space between them, a sound that now seemed to press down on her chest like a weight. Then, just as she thought she might suffocate in the silence, the driver spoke, his voice low and even. "You know," he began, "I've been in this business for a long time. A lot of people think they can get away with not paying. Think I won't notice." The woman's breath caught in her throat. "I never meant to." He interrupted her with a sharp glance in the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing. "You never meant to, right? That's what they all say. But in the end, it doesn't matter what you meant. What matters is what happens next." Her stomach churned, and she shifted uncomfortably in the seat. "What do you mean by that?" The driver's lips curled into something that might have been a smile if it weren't so cold and menacing. "You'll see. You'll see soon enough." She swallowed hard, trying to gather her thoughts. She had to think fast. The longer she stayed in this car, the more trapped she felt. But where could she go? She didn't know this part of town. She didn't know if there were any nearby businesses or streetlights. She could try to make a run for it, but something told her that wouldn't end well. And the driver, there was something off about him. The way his eyes never seemed to leave her when they did glance in the mirror. The way his lips were pressed into a thin line, as if he were holding something back, something much darker than frustration or anger. The car slowed, taking another turn into a narrower road, one that looked even less familiar than the ones they had already passed. The buildings on either side of the street were run down, abandoned even. Faded signs hung loosely from rusted poles, and the windows of the nearby buildings were dark, their outlines barely visible in the moonlight. The street felt empty, isolated, like a place where things went to disappear. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The driver didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the road, though his grip on the wheel tightened. "Doesn't matter. Just sit back and relax," he said, almost too calmly, his words sending a shiver down her spine. "Relax?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "I don't think I can do that." There was a brief silence before he spoke again, his voice colder this time. "You don't get it, do you? You will relax. Whether you like it or not." The word sent a chill down her spine. Something was terribly wrong. She had been in enough tense situations to know when the air was thick with threat, but this was different. This wasn't just anger or frustration. This was control. And she was beginning to realize that the driver had more power in this moment than she could ever hope to regain. She needed to think, to act. But how? Just then, the car came to a screeching halt. The woman nearly lurched forward in her seat, her heart racing in her chest. The driver turned sharply into a dimly lit parking lot, the tires skidding on the gravel. Before she could say anything, he threw the car in park and killed the engine, plunging them into darkness. The sudden silence was deafening. The woman's breath caught in her throat as she realized they were completely alone in the middle of nowhere. The driver didn't move at first, just sat there, staring straight ahead. His shoulders were tense, and the air between them felt thick with anticipation. The woman's eyes darted around the dark lot. She couldn't see much, just the vague shapes of abandoned cars and a distant building that looked as if it hadn't seen any life in years. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. "Get out," the driver said suddenly, his voice cutting through the stillness like a knife. She froze. "What?" "Out." "Now," he repeated, his tone sharper this time. "Get out of my car." She hesitated, looking at the door, then back at him. There was something cold in his eyes, something that made her feel like a mouse trapped in a corner. But she couldn't go anywhere. She didn't know where she was, and she was terrified of what might happen if she tried to run. The driver's gaze remained fixed on her, and the tension in the car was palpable. His hand moved toward the door, and she realized with horror that he was unlocking it, preparing to force her out. In a split second, she acted on pure instinct. She flung her arm out, reaching for the door handle before he could open it. She twisted it, yanked it open, and bolted from the car, her legs weak beneath her. Her heart hammered in her chest as she took off into the darkness. The gravel crunched beneath her feet as she ran, adrenaline pushing her forward. She didn't look back, didn't dare to. The night air was cold against her skin, and the wind whipped at her hair as she sprinted toward what she hoped was safety. But she didn't know where she was going. She didn't know what she was running toward. Her breath came in short gasps, and her legs began to burn as she forced herself to keep going. She had no plan. No escape route. Just the need to get away. Then, behind her, she heard it. The roar of the engine. The taxi was following her. Panic surged through her chest, a new wave of terror flooding her system. She couldn't outrun him, not for long. Her feet slipped on the gravel as she turned down a narrow alleyway, looking for any sign of help. There were no people, no lights. Only the sound of the engine, growing louder. She risked a glance over her shoulder and saw the headlights of the car barreling toward her. The driver was gaining on her. She couldn't keep running forever. Her mind raced. What could she do? What was the next move? A sharp corner appeared ahead of her, and without thinking, she turned, darting into the darkness. She needed to hide, somewhere, anywhere. She couldn't let him catch her. Not now. The sound of the car screeching to a halt made her heart jump. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Then, she heard footsteps behind her. The sound of someone breathing heavily, moving faster. The chase had only just begun. The alleyway felt like it was closing in on her. Every step she took seemed to echo louder in the stillness of the night. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she twisted and turned down narrow passages, her mind desperately searching for an escape, a way to lose him. But the sound of the taxi's engine was still too close. Too persistent. She could hear the screech of tires, the relentless growl of the engine, and somewhere beneath it all, the driver's voice, low, like a predator closing in on its prey. "You can't run forever," he shouted into the night. "I'll find you, no matter where you go." The woman's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't dare look back, but she could hear the faint sound of footsteps on the gravel behind her. The driver wasn't far behind. She needed to think. To act. Her legs burned as she sprinted down the alley, her shoes skidding against the rough surface. She could feel her muscles screaming for relief, but there was no time. The adrenaline coursing through her veins kept her going, pushing her forward, even when she wanted to stop. She wasn't sure what would happen if he caught up with her. But everything in her body screamed that she couldn't let him. Not now. The alley opened up into a small, dark street. To the left, she saw a set of stairs leading up to what looked like a fire escape. It was her only option. She took a deep breath and headed toward it, her heart racing in her chest. Every instinct told her to keep moving, keep running, but that was impossible now. The taxi's engine roared louder, the sound of tires skidding closer. She reached the bottom of the fire escape and grabbed the cold, rusted metal ladder. Her fingers slipped as she tried to climb, but there was no time to lose. She kicked off the ground and hauled herself up, climbing faster than she ever had in her life, her heart thudding in her chest with each pull. From below, she heard the sound of the taxi's tires screeching to a stop, and then the sound of the driver's footsteps. "I'll make sure you regret running," he growled. "You don't have a choice anymore." Her pulse raced as she reached the top of the fire escape, her hands trembling as she pulled herself over the edge and onto the roof. She looked back down, her eyes scanning the alley below for any sign of him. But all she could see was darkness, the shadows swallowing everything. She had made it up, at least for now. But how long would it take for him to find her? She stood there, frozen for a moment, trying to listen for any sign of the driver's presence. The sound of her breathing was the only thing she could hear, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she tried to steady herself. The wind had picked up, howling through the narrow spaces between the buildings, carrying with it the faint sounds of the city. She couldn't stay here forever. She had to keep moving. She crouched down, trying to steady her breath. Her eyes scanned the rooftops ahead, searching for a path, for a way out of the maze she had unknowingly stepped into. There had to be a way to escape. There had to be something. A glimmer of light caught her eye in the distance, just a faint glint from one of the neighboring rooftops. She wasn't sure what it was. But it was enough to spark a sliver of hope. She wasn't entirely trapped. She had to keep moving. But then she heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps on the rooftop. She froze. The driver was here. He had followed her up. Her heart lurched in her chest. She couldn't believe it. He had somehow managed to track her up to the roof. How? Was he following her scent? Had he somehow anticipated her every move? She slowly rose to her feet, her body trembling with fear. She had no idea how to fight this man, how to protect herself from whatever he had planned. She had already tried running, and now she had nowhere to go. The footsteps grew louder, closer. She scanned the rooftop again, looking for any other escape routes. There was a fire escape on the far side of the building, but she would have to cross open ground to get there. And if the driver was still behind her, she couldn't afford to be exposed. She turned quickly and darted toward the edge of the building. She had to move fast. She didn't know how much time she had before he was on top of her. Her breath came in frantic bursts as she leaped over a gap between two buildings, her feet barely landing before she pushed off again, propelling herself toward the next roof. The wind howled in her ears, but the sound of the driver's footsteps grew closer, louder. Then, from behind her, she heard his voice. "You can't hide from me forever." His words were filled with menace, cutting through the air like a blade. The driver was gaining on her, his footsteps louder, closer. She had to make a choice. She couldn't keep running like this. She needed to face him. To fight back. But she didn't know how. She looked around, her mind racing for any options. There was nothing. Just the dark expanse of the rooftop and the city far below her. Her gaze landed on a piece of metal pipe, discarded near the edge of the building. It was a long, rusty length of scrap, barely visible in the dark. It would have to do. She grabbed it quickly, gripping it with both hands as she took a deep breath. She could hear the driver's footsteps growing louder now, too close for comfort. She wasn't sure what she would do with the pipe, but it was the only weapon she had. The moment she heard his footsteps just behind her, she spun around, the pipe raised above her head. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice raw with fear and desperation. "Stay back, or I'll..." Her voice trailed off as the driver emerged from the shadows, stepping into the dim light. His face was pale, his features twisted in something resembling rage, but there was something else, something colder, something predatory. He didn't seem to care that she was holding the pipe. He didn't seem to care at all. He took a step forward, his eyes locked on hers, cold and unblinking. "You think that's going to stop me?" he sneered, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not in control here." Her hands shook as she gripped the pipe tighter, her entire body tense with fear. She was out of options. If she didn't do something now, he was going to. Before she could react, the driver lunged at her, a blur of motion that caught her off guard. The pipe flew out of her hands as he slammed into her, sending her crashing to the ground. She gasped for air as the wind was knocked out of her, her body pinned beneath his weight. For a moment, everything went still. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the weight of his body on top of hers. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Please don't." He didn't say anything. His eyes locked onto hers, cold and calculating, as if measuring the best way to break her. But then, just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. The driver pulled away, his expression flickering. He backed up a few steps, then stood there, watching her, his chest rising and falling as if struggling to control his own emotions. "I should have just left you there," he muttered, as if to himself. "But you're different. You don't just give up, do you?" The woman didn't move, didn't say anything. She just lay there, her heart pounding in her chest, trying to make sense of what had just happened. What was he talking about? Why was he still here? His gaze softened for a moment, but it was fleeting. He took one more step back, his hand moving to his pocket. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke again. His voice was quieter now, almost regretful. "Maybe I've gone too far. Maybe you deserve a chance." The words didn't make sense. What was he saying? What was he going to do? And then, in the eerie quiet of the rooftop, he turned and walked away. The night air had become colder, each gust of wind biting into her skin as she lay motionless on the rooftop, staring at the spot where the driver had just been. Her heart still raced, and her mind swirled with confusion. Why had he stopped? Why had he let her go? His words echoed in her ears, making no sense. "Maybe you deserve a chance." A chance. For what? She slowly pushed herself up from the cold rooftop, her body sore from the fall, her legs trembling from the tension and the frantic sprint. Her knees buckled for a moment, and she had to steady herself on the edge of the roof. The sound of the city, far below her, felt muffled, as if the entire world had been put on mute. Her breath was shaky, the cold air filling her lungs as she tried to process what had just happened. She should have been terrified. And she was, but there was something else, something deeper gnawing at her. The question kept circling in her mind: why did he stop? What was it about her that made him hesitate? What had he meant by, "You deserve a chance"? Her mind raced back to the car ride, to the moment when she had first entered the taxi. The awkwardness, the tension, the way the driver's eyes lingered on her too long in the rearview mirror. It had all felt wrong from the start, but now, after everything that had just happened, she was beginning to feel that it wasn't just a random encounter. There was something more to this, a connection, or perhaps something darker. The driver wasn't some random person who lost his temper. No. He knew her. Or at least, he thought he did. She stood up fully, her knees still weak beneath her, and took a few tentative steps forward. The city lights glimmered in the distance, but she knew she couldn't go back. The driver had left, but only after making his intentions clear. He had let her go, but that wasn't a sign of mercy, it was a warning. A warning that he was still out there. Watching. Waiting. Her fingers brushed the cold metal of the fire escape, and she thought for a moment about going back down, about finding a way off the rooftops. She could run. She could get away from him. But where would she go? She had no idea where she was, and no idea what the driver's next move would be. She couldn't be sure she'd escape again. And more than that, she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that this was only the beginning. She had to find out why he had stopped. She had to find out what he knew, what he wanted. And perhaps more importantly, she needed to understand why she had become the target of his twisted game. But the streets below were unfamiliar. She had no idea where she was. Everything about the situation felt suffocating. Every step she took felt like she was walking deeper into a trap. It was then that she heard it. The faintest sound. A whisper on the wind, a rustling. She turned sharply toward it, her eyes scanning the darkness. There, in the distance, a faint light flickered, just barely visible, but it was there. The glow came from a small building at the end of the alley. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting her inside. A chill ran through her spine. The place looked abandoned, old, with peeling paint and broken windows. But the light, it seemed to flicker with purpose. She felt a strange pull toward it. Her instinct screamed at her to keep moving, to keep running, but her curiosity overpowered her fear. Maybe there was someone in there who could help. Maybe there was a clue to the puzzle she was desperately trying to piece together. Taking a deep breath, she turned and began walking toward the building, her steps slow but purposeful. She knew this could be a trap, she knew she could be walking straight into a dangerous situation. But her gut told her that the answers she was looking for lay ahead, inside that dark, mysterious building. With each step, the light grew brighter, and the door slowly creaked open wider, as though inviting her in. Her heart hammered in her chest as she reached for the doorknob. The air around her felt thick, charged with an electric tension. She paused, staring at the door in hesitation. Every fiber of her being told her to turn around and leave. But something deeper inside her pushed her forward, urged her to find out what lay behind it. She twisted the handle, and the door creaked open. Inside, the building was dark. But there was a faint light coming from the far side, flickering in the corner of the room. The air was heavy with dust, and the floorboards groaned under her weight. She hesitated before stepping inside, but then she moved forward cautiously, her eyes darting around the room. At first, it seemed like any old abandoned place, dilapidated furniture, old crates stacked haphazardly in the corners. But as she walked deeper into the building, the sound of movement caught her attention. Her heart skipped a beat. Someone was here. She crept forward, her breath shallow, her senses alert. She rounded a corner and froze. There, in the dim light, a figure stood, a tall man, his back to her, his silhouette barely visible in the shadows. It was the driver. Her pulse surged, and her feet nearly gave way beneath her. He was standing there, motionless, staring out of a broken window. He hadn't seen her yet, and for a moment, she just watched him, trying to make sense of what was happening. What was he doing here? Why was he standing alone in this dark building? Slowly, cautiously, she took a step forward. Her foot hit the floor with a soft creak, and the man turned sharply, his eyes flashing with recognition. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice cold and low. "You don't belong here." She froze, her heart racing. His words were chilling, and there was no hint of surprise in his voice. As though he had been expecting her. "You know who I am," she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped toward her slowly, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. His lips curled into something that resembled a smile but didn't quite reach his eyes. "I know more about you than you think," he said, his voice almost too calm. "You don't understand, do you? You never have." She swallowed hard, feeling a wave of unease wash over her. "What do you mean? Who are you?" The driver took another step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. He was taller than she remembered, his features sharper in the dim light. The tension between them felt suffocating. She took a step back instinctively, but he was already too close. "I know everything about you," he said softly. "Every move, every decision. I've been watching you for a long time." A rush of disbelief coursed through her veins. "What? What are you talking about?" His lips twitched as though he were fighting back a smirk. "You think this is just a random encounter?" "No. This has been planned for a long time." "Planned?" Her voice rose, panic clawing at her throat. "What are you talking about? What do you want from me?" The driver's gaze darkened, and for a moment, she saw something cold and predatory behind his eyes. He stepped closer still, and she felt the walls closing in around her. "It's not about what I want," he said softly. "It's about what you want. What you deserve." She backed away, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. "I don't understand. Please, just tell me what's going on." The driver's face grew colder. "You'll understand soon enough." You'll see why I've been watching you all this time. You'll see why you had no choice." With that, he turned and walked away from her, disappearing into the shadows of the building. And as she stood there, alone in the dark, the weight of his words sank in. She wasn't just caught in some random situation, she had been chosen. But why? What did he mean by, "what you deserve"? The questions, once vague, now seemed like they were the only thing that mattered. She had to find out the truth. No matter what it took. No matter how much it cost. She stood in the abandoned building, her heart hammering in her chest, her breath shallow and ragged as the echoes of the driver's cryptic words rang in her ears. She wasn't sure if it was the dim light, the silence, or the overwhelming tension in the air, but everything around her felt unreal. The walls seemed to close in on her as her mind raced. "You've been chosen," his words whispered in her mind, a haunting reminder of how out of control she felt. This had never been just a random encounter, a freak event. No, it had been deliberate. Calculated. And it was clear now that she was in the middle of something much larger than she had first realized. The sound of footsteps echoed through the building, pulling her back to reality. Her body tensed, and her gaze darted around, searching for the source. The place was still dim, shadows stretching across the floor, but the footsteps were unmistakable. Someone was coming. Her heart dropped. Was it the driver? Was he coming back for her? Was he not done with her yet? She turned to make a run for it, but the door she had entered through was now blocked. It was as though the building itself had conspired to trap her here, cutting off any route of escape. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, the air thick with tension, as though something much larger than just this encounter was at play. Her mind raced, trying to form a plan, but nothing made sense. She had no allies. No way out. No one who could save her. Her eyes landed on an old window at the far end of the room, cracked open, the night air moving through it, offering the smallest sliver of hope. Maybe she could make it there. But before she could move, the footsteps grew closer. Thud. 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 The sound was deliberate, calculated, too controlled to be the result of mere panic or chance. She slowly turned her head toward the sound, her body tensing in anticipation, expecting the worst. She had no idea who else might be in this building. Maybe there was someone else. Maybe they weren't alone in this darkness. And then she saw him. The driver. He emerged from the shadows, his figure tall and imposing, his eyes narrowed as he surveyed her. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of something dark and calculating. He didn't look angry, nor did he look sympathetic. There was no emotion in his face, no compassion, no remorse. It was as if he was studying her, deciding something in his mind. "I told you," he said in a low, detached voice. "You don't understand yet. But you will." She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat was dry, her body shaking, her thoughts racing, trying to make sense of everything. "You're scared," the driver said, as if reading her mind. "You think I'm the monster. But you don't know who the real monster is. You don't know the whole story." He stepped closer, his heavy boots echoing in the silence as he closed the distance between them. She stepped back, instinctively trying to put more distance between them, but the building was so small. There was nowhere to go. Nowhere to hide. "Tell me," she said, her voice trembling but desperate. "What do you want from me?" "Why me?" The driver paused, studying her for a moment. His face softened slightly, but there was no kindness in his eyes. Only something darker, something far more sinister. "I don't want anything from you," he said, almost pitying her. "You're just a pawn in this. A part of something much bigger. Something you'll never understand until it's too late." A chill ran down her spine, the hair on the back of her neck standing on end. "What do you mean? What is this about?" The driver gave a dry, humorless chuckle. You think you're in control. You think you can escape. But you don't know the truth. You don't know who's really pulling the strings. She swallowed hard, trying to calm herself, trying to make sense of the words that didn't quite add up. I don't understand. I don't know who you are, or why you're doing this to me. For a moment, he didn't answer. He only stared at her with those cold, calculating eyes. Then, finally, he spoke again. You don't know me. But you will. In time, you'll understand. I'm not the one you need to be afraid of. And I'm not the one who's been watching you. But I'm here now, and it's too late to back out. She shook her head in disbelief. What do you want from me? Please, just tell me what's happening. The driver took another step closer, his voice growing even lower, the menace in his tone sending a wave of dread washing over her. I don't want anything. But you've crossed a line. A line you didn't even know was there. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating. She could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her, suffocating her. She didn't know what was real anymore. Every word he spoke only made the situation more confusing, more terrifying. But there was something else in his voice, a sense of regret? A sense of burden? The driver's gaze softened just slightly. You think I'm the bad guy here. But I'm not. I'm just the messenger. I've been forced into this role, and you, have been dragged into it because of your own choices. Because of the path you've been following. Her pulse raced as she tried to make sense of this, but the more she heard, the less she understood. She had no memory of crossing any lines. She had no idea what he meant by path. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His gaze darkened. You don't even remember, do you? The question hit her like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, she felt a sharp, cold wave of nausea wash over her. She didn't understand what he was talking about. Had she done something wrong? Had she crossed some unseen line in her past that had set all this in motion? Had she unknowingly put herself in the middle of a game she couldn't control? She tried to find words, tried to ask questions, but it was as if the answers were just out of her reach, slipping through her fingers like sand. You're not the first one to be involved in this, the driver continued. There have been others before you. Others who made the same mistake. And now, it's your turn to face the consequences. Her stomach twisted. What mistake? What consequences? The driver's eyes narrowed. I don't want to do this. I never wanted any of this. But you've pushed me into a corner. And now there's no turning back. His words hung in the air like a cloud of poison. He was speaking in riddles, offering no clear answers, no solutions. Just more questions. More uncertainty. And the deeper she went, the more she felt as though she was drowning in a sea of confusion. She took a step back, her mind racing, but the driver didn't follow. He stood still, watching her, as if waiting for her to come to some sort of realization. I don't understand, she whispered. Please. Please, just tell me what's happening. What have I done? The driver exhaled slowly, his face hardening once more. You didn't do anything. That's the problem. You've been a part of something much bigger, something that was always out of your control. And now, well, now, you've made your choice. What choice? What are you talking about? She demanded, feeling the panic rise in her chest. He stepped closer again, his face inches from hers. His breath was cold, his presence overpowering. She could see it in his eyes now, something more than menace. Something darker. The choice you made, he whispered, was the one that brought you here. To this place. To me. Her body stiffened, a wave of fear creeping up her spine. Brought her here? What did he mean? Your choice, he repeated softly, was to survive. But survival always comes with a cost. The word struck her like lightning. They didn't make sense, yet in some twisted way, they felt like the key to unlocking everything that had happened. She hadn't chosen this. She hadn't asked for any of this. But it was happening. And she was trapped in it. The air in the abandoned building felt heavier, as if it had become thicker with the weight of unspoken truths and inevitable consequences. The woman's mind buzzed, every word the driver had spoken replaying in her head, over and over again, as she tried to make sense of it all. Survival always comes with a cost. His words clung to her like an unshakable shadow, pressing her deeper into the darkness of confusion. What had she chosen? When? She had never consciously made a decision to get tangled in any kind of conspiracy or deadly game. She had been a passenger, a regular woman just trying to get from one place to another. But somewhere along the way, her life had veered off course, leading her straight into this dangerous maze. The driver, now standing just inches away from her, was silent for a long time. His eyes were filled with something like a mixture of regret and resignation, but there was no warmth in them. No compassion. He was a man who had long ago made peace with the darkness, and it was clear that there was no room for light in his world. "You still don't get it, do you?" he murmured softly, his voice low and haunting. "You thought this was just about money. A simple taxi ride. But it was never about that. You were never meant to just be a passenger." Her heart raced. She could feel the panic rising again, threatening to consume her, but she forced herself to stay calm. To stay focused. She had to understand. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me? Why did you bring me here? Why have you been watching me?" The driver's lips twitched, but there was no smile. His eyes flickered with a dark understanding, as if he was anticipating her reaction. "I didn't bring you here. You brought yourself here. You just don't realize it yet." She shook her head, confusion clouding her thoughts. "I don't understand. I didn't choose any of this. She stopped herself, realizing how foolish that sounded. "You said I chose survival. But how? When?" He took a slow, deliberate step closer, his shadow overtaking her in the dim light. His presence was almost suffocating. Survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about the decisions you make, the paths you take. Every choice you make pushes you further into this. And it's not just about the physical act of surviving. It's about surviving the consequences of the choices you make, even when you don't know you're making them. Her mind swirled, trying to grasp what he was saying, but the words didn't add up. There was something bigger here, something that didn't make sense. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. "I just took a cab. I didn't ask for this. I didn't do anything wrong." The driver's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, there was something in his eyes that almost seemed like pity. "You've been running from something your whole life. Something deep inside you that you've tried to bury. And now, it's caught up with you. It's all led to this. You're part of a game, and you've been a part of it for longer than you think." "A game?" Her heart skipped a beat. She was beginning to feel like she was losing her grip on reality. Was this all a setup? A conspiracy? Or was this man just insane? "You're not crazy," the driver said, almost as if he were reading her mind. "This is real. It's always been real. You've just never seen it for what it is." She backed away, shaking her head. "I don't believe you. None of this makes sense." He stepped closer again, his eyes unwavering. "You think this is a coincidence? That the moment you stepped into my cab was random? No. I've been watching you for months. Everything you've done, everything you've said, has led us to this point." Her breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about? You've been watching me? For months?" He nodded slowly, his voice growing darker with every word. You've been playing the game all along, just like everyone else. The game doesn't start when you realize it, it starts when you make your first choice. The one that sets everything in motion. Her pulse raced. What choice? What game? The driver's expression turned grim, his voice taking on a note of finality. You took a taxi ride. You took a ride with me because you didn't have money to pay. You thought it was just about a cab fare. But it's never been just about that. He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. She was shaking now, her thoughts a blur, but she couldn't stop herself from listening. You were supposed to pay, he continued, but you couldn't. So you took a chance. A risk. That was the first decision. The one that put you on the path to this. She opened her mouth to protest, but he silenced her with a gesture. It wasn't about the money. It was about the way you handled it. The way you chose to react to the situation. You didn't beg. You didn't try to manipulate me. You didn't cry. You just accepted it. And that decision put you on the radar. Because it's not about what happens to you, it's about how you handle it. You chose survival in the face of something you didn't understand. And that's why you're here now. That's why I've been watching you. She shook her head again, her thoughts still scattered. This doesn't make sense. What do you want from me? Why me? I'm just. You're not just anything, he interrupted sharply. You're one of the few who chose to survive when you had no idea what you were facing. You weren't a victim. You didn't fold under pressure. You stood your ground. And that's what made you a target. Not just by me, but by them. Them, she repeated, her voice filled with dread. Who are you talking about? The driver's eyes darkened, his lips curling into a cruel, humorless smile. You think I'm the one pulling the strings? I'm just the messenger. I'm just the one who's been forced to deliver the final test. Test? She asked, barely able to keep her voice steady. What test? The test that will show you who you really are. The test that will decide if you deserve to live. If you deserve to survive what's coming next. Her stomach twisted into knots. What was he talking about? What had she gotten herself into? This is just the beginning, he said, his voice colder than ever. Survival isn't over. And you still have a choice to make. She felt a sharp, icy panic take hold of her. What choice? What are you talking about? He stepped back, his expression suddenly distant. The choice you make now will determine everything. You'll either walk away, free from this game, or you'll become part of it, trapped in a cycle that will never end. Her mind was racing. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But the way he spoke, the finality in his voice, told her that it was. She was at the center of something far more sinister than a simple taxi ride gone wrong. This was a game of survival. And she had been a player from the very beginning. The driver's final words echoed in her ears. Make your choice. She felt the weight of those words settle over her like a stone. The decision that had been forced upon her, the decision she hadn't even realized she was making. She had been caught in this web for far longer than she'd known. And now, standing in front of the driver, she was faced with her final test. The choice that would define her future. Her heart raced, her mind a whirl of confusion, but deep down, she knew what she had to do. She wasn't going to play his game. She wasn't going to be controlled by him. By them. Whoever they were. I choose, she said quietly, her voice trembling but resolute. I choose to survive. On my terms. Not yours. The driver's gaze flickered with something unreadable, but then he gave a small nod. You made the right choice, he said quietly. Now, you're free. And just like that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the building. She stood there, her body trembling, her heart racing, but a sense of clarity washed over her. The game was over. She had made it out. But there was still something more she needed to understand. As she left the building, the city lights illuminated the path ahead, but the mystery of her ordeal, what had truly happened, what had led her here, lingered in her mind. She had survived. But the truth, the full truth, would always remain just out of reach.